I hear a lot of talk about tax incentives helping LA musicians, and I'd like more facts.
There's a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings about the finer details of tax incentives. To best understand how tax incentives impact LA musicians, we'll need some context to differentiate between separate tax breaks. Let's start with California. Did you know that the state of California has already been offering a 20% scoring tax break for years?
Really? Well, I'm sure that's helped, right?
In a word, no. Despite these available tax incentives, union recording has plummeted during a similar period of time.
Why would that be?
Well, to understand why, we'll need to see this 20% discount in context. Looking at these recording budget examples, we can see that a $100,000 recording budget could save $20,000, while a $750,000 budget can save $150,000.
Wait, with all this free money, why isn't everyone lining up to record here?
Well, it's most likely because when someone records with the American Federation of Musicians, they not only have to pay the upfront recording costs, but they also take on secondary market obligations for things like DVDs and TV airings.
But how does that impact LA musicians?
In reality, most films already don't record in Los Angeles to avoid paying these residuals. They go elsewhere, and tax incentives won't bring them back.
Yeah, but residuals can't make that much of a difference, can they?
Well, as we can see, even a flop like Death to Smoochie generated almost $200,000 in residuals, while blockbusters can exceed $3 million. So when you compare these residuals, which would be obligations if scoring union in Los Angeles, to the savings that would be earned through tax incentives, those savings are typically minimal.
I hear about runaway production all the time. Don't we need tax breaks to fix that?
Despite wishful thinking and misleading information, it's also important to realize that scoring tax breaks are not the same as production tax breaks, and films which receive production tax breaks are under no obligation to record here. And for union musicians, it's worth noting that there's no way to require tax incentive recipient films to record union. That's because it's illegal to tie tax incentives to any particular group or organization. These facts, coupled with the lopsided economics, reveal tax incentives for what they really are: red herrings. As much as LAAFM union musicians want to catch more fish using state tax incentives, an increase in California tax breaks would still basically yield the same failed result.
Okay, but what about other states giving tax breaks? Doesn't California have to compete with them?
Perhaps to increase film production. That's why most states offer film tax incentives to help boost their local economies.
Doesn't that hurt LA musicians?
Actually not, because almost all of these states aren't interested in score recording. They're solely focused on bringing film production to their states because of the production jobs it creates and the local businesses it benefits.
But I don't get it. Doesn't California have a runaway production problem?
While runaway production is a major problem for California film crews and local businesses, musicians are one of the few groups who don't suffer when production leaves town. Most other states just aren't in the soundtrack business, and Los Angeles musicians are free to go after those jobs the same as if the films were made here. As a matter of fact, the majority of films released in 2013 that were recorded by Los Angeles musicians were movies shot partially or entirely outside of California. That's right, nowadays, scores for runaway productions that go out of state are the bread and butter of California union recordings. If any of the films shown here had actually filmed in California because of tax incentives, that would definitely help our local film crews and local businesses, but unfortunately for California musicians, that wouldn't add one new job.
So LA musicians already got those films?
Right, and you can't catch the same fish twice. In short, taxpayer dollars in other states rarely hurt nor benefit LA musicians.
But what about New York? They are interested in scoring, and don't they offer a huge tax break?
Well, some people do point to New York's tax incentives as a positive role model, since that state provides one of the largest film tax incentive programs. Not only that, it also includes a post-production carve-out to entice scoring and other post-production work. But while that sounds great on paper, the actual results have yielded only one solitary tax recipient movie scoring in New York in 2013. So this is probably not the best role model for using tax incentives to entice scoring.
Okay, knowing that neither New York nor California's scoring incentive programs have worked, what have LA musicians done to change things?
Well, they recently went to Sacramento, beat their chest, and came home with a meaningless extra 5% tax break.
Wow, 5%?
Yup. Remember this chart? With the failed 20% tax incentives, which brought in almost no new work, now add in the even punier 5% tax breaks. It all basically adds up to the same worthless numbers. What failed before is doomed to fail again. This is because the amount of the tax break is almost guaranteed to be trivial and dismissed in the face of residuals towering over it to the tune of millions of dollars. Bottom line, driven decision makers would hardly be persuaded to take advantage of almost any tax break because in the grand scheme of their upfront and back-end music budgets, it's extraordinarily insignificant.
What about England? We're losing so much work to London musicians. Why is that?
Well, England does have a huge advantage over the United States because the British Musicians Union doesn't require secondary market residuals. In England, as with the rest of the world, there's a buyout for secondary market payments. They just don't exist outside of the AFM. As a result, London has become a thriving scoring destination for American film companies. This is even for their films shot in America, which receive no English tax credits. It's for this reason that so many Los Angeles-based filmmakers and production companies converge at Abbey Road and Air Lyndhurst on movies that have nothing to do with British tax incentives.
What about films that do shoot in the UK?
For those, it's a double win since they can receive British tax incentives and record there without secondary market obligations. And as much as we might bemoan their tax advantage and their union's more appealing contract agreements, short of erasing London from the map, there's nothing we can do to limit how they conduct their business.
Okay, but where does that leave LA musicians?
First, we need to stop focusing so much of our energy on pursuing tax incentives to fix our problems. As we've shown, tax incentives are red herrings, and distracting ourselves with them is dangerous. While we spend our time focusing on the herrings that cannot be caught, we're missing out on the tremendous ocean of different fish, large and small, that could actually help sustain our local recording community. There are literally hundreds of films being made every year, and it's our responsibility to find enticing bait to lure studios and producers creating those films so that they want to record with LA musicians. Because if we don't catch that ocean of hundreds of real fish, someone else will.